and welcome to Circle Time, the Early Years podcast. I'm Glenn Denny. Now, in the early years, we're always looking for ways to challenge and extend our children's physical development skills. And we've all got a balance bike or two lurking in our sheds. Now, today's guest will help us to make the most of this equipment. Welcome to Circle Time, Marc Molloy.
Hi, Glenn. How you doing?
All good, thank you. Now, Marc, your kind of background is, well, initially it was, I think, travel and tourism, but you kind of got into like the sport development, and more interesting is cycling as well. That's kind of your hobby that's kind of taken over a bit.
Like
is it fair to say?
Hobby gone wrong? Yeah, hobby gone mad. Yeah, I mean, yeah, like you say, I went to university and did an international tourism degree, and I was managing a hotel, and I thought this just isn't for me. I want to be outside and I want to be helping people, and so I went and got a job working at the Prince's Trust. That was a 12-week program helping kids from places where they weren't getting the support they needed and things like that. If anybody doesn't know Prince's Trust, it's an amazing program. And I did 3 teams of that, which is about the limit of what you can handle because it's heavy going, you know, it's difficult work. And then I went and joined the local government as a sports development officer. And I did that for 3 years. And then I just decided that I wanted to get cycling going. That was my passion, and I rode a lot, and there wasn't really a place for developing that within the council, within that scheme that we had at the time. So I just said to my boss one day, like on a whim, really, hey, listen, I really want to do cycling. He was like, well, you know, you can't do it here. So I said, right, I'm going to do it myself. So that was 2007, and I literally walked out with nothing. And then I bought myself 2 BMXs, and I started going into schools and doing what were called at the time, because it was July, so we called it like Tour de France sessions. And that's really how we started. So, I mean, obviously I had a background in cycling and I liked it and I rode a lot. But, you know, I didn't know one end of a child from the other, and I didn't know, you know, how they behaved and what they expected to see in class. And I was just going, well, if I can make the next Chris Boardman here, or in the next Bradley Wiggins or whatever. And so after, you know, maybe 6 months, I realized, well, you know, my skills aren't good enough here, and like I need to get better. So then it was really just a case of researching, you know, like how children are. And, you know, I would do a lot of things. I just go and babysit nephews and nieces and things like that, really simple things, and just try different stuff, because I'm quite tall and loud. So the first thing for me was just to like learn how to get down to the level of the children and how to speak nicely to them, and really simple things that, you know, you guys as nursery people will take for granted. But I wasn't that. I was a local government official, was highly trained, and, you know, and I thought this is going to be a breeze, but it wasn't. Like everyone, you know, we've all seen people that have gone into those environments and thought, well, yeah, it'll be fine. And, you know, the children pretty quickly find you out. So, you know, on my side, I knew a lot about cycling. I was very, very keen. I seem to have an affinity with children by luck rather than judgment. You know, like children would laugh at my silly jokes, and, you know, I'd pull faces and they weren't scary, they were funny, and I managed to get away with it, you know. So, you know, after a year probably of trying, I thought, okay, this is definitely something I want to do. And then I started to look at different ways we could work in different settings. This was primarily in primary school at this point. So we're doing Key Stage 1 and 2. And then we started to deliver bikeability in schools, which is where you take children out on the road for the first time, which in itself is extremely, extremely stressful and difficult for them. So all those skills that I'd learned, I'm probably 5 years in at this point. So this is 2012. The Olympics are happening. And then becomes a real thirst for cycling because of Bradley Wiggins and Mark Cavendish and these guys. So then cycling sort of, you know, people were starting to ask me, can you come in, rather than me having to go to schools and say, hey, I'm cycling. And, you know, so that first few years was really about creating that understanding that cycling doesn't have to be 100-mile bike ride up a mountain. You know, it can be done on a tennis court in school, and we can adapt the games and we can make them fun. And, you know, I'm still doing the same thing now, essentially. So it's just simplifying cycling and making it more achievable, more, you know, easier to digest for the children and easier to deliver for the teachers, really. So anyway, so I'm delivering bikeability at this point, and I have a class of 30 children, and for the first 3 or 4 years I would get maybe 1 or 2 children in a class that couldn't ride a bike. And that was okay, because I could have a little bit of time at lunchtime and I'd help them and things like that. Maybe not be able to take them out to the road, but at least give them an experience. But by the time I was about 10 years in, that number had dropped. And so you would get as many as, depending on the place, half a class that couldn't ride a bike. And it was always the same reasons. It was always, mum and dad haven't got time to teach me, or, it's not very safe, or I don't have somewhere near me where I can practice, all completely valid reasons.
Yeah.
But still, this kind of worrying trend, for me especially, of it had become this kind of thing where cycling was a nice to have, or not even a nice to have, just almost a bit of a nuisance. Some places that I went, it's like, well, we'd like to cycle, but what are you going to do, kind of thing. So, and I totally understood, bikes were getting expensive, and you've got nowhere to lock them up, and the roads are getting busier, and so it's not safe on there, and cycle paths. This was before that real big infrastructure drive that amazing companies out there are doing now to improve on those things. So it was really a case of like re-educating people. And what I thought was, if they're not getting taught when they're babies, when they're small, when they're infants, then let's do that. Because by the time then they get to year 5, year 6, we know they can ride because we've taught them. And that's really how Cyclings came about, which is the name of the balance bike scheme that I created. And so we work with kind of local teachers and the pediatric department in Bristol, which is where I was based in North Somerset, Bristol. We were delivering sessions. And we basically just sat down and got the national curriculum and said, okay, well, how can we make cycling relevant to the curriculum as well as being fun for children and something that teachers want to deliver, So we went through the whole national curriculum. We boiled it down to the 9 characteristics of effective learning, created a game to fit in with those characteristics, or various games that would fit in those characteristics. And then we started to deliver it in school. And then, like everything, we refined it and we made it better. And that game doesn't work, and that game does. And we came up with this product that now we're in a position, all these years later, that we are starting to think about giving it to nurseries and EYFS settings that they can deliver it themselves. So it's a long-winded background, but yeah, that was basically how Cyclings came around, really.
Really, it wasn't just like it. It's kind of background in almost like personal research and development that way. I mean, you were talking about bikeability there. I mean, years ago, I was a bikeability tutor as well.
Right.
And I mean, I used to do it for 6 to 8 year olds because I did it as part of my, when I was a Beaver Scout leader.
Right.
And we did it as part of that so they could get their cycling safety badge.
Yeah.
And we did it that way, but we did it in partnership with a local authority. They would come and do the actual assessment, but we tutored.
Yeah, nice.
And it was that bit that it always made me wonder as well, that was there something that would teach younger children? Because I remember having a bike as a small child. I had my stabilizers on it, and then eventually I took my stabilizers off, and that was big. But balance bikes weren't a thing then as well. It was like you just had to find your center of balance without your stabilizers, and usually with your dad running after you, ready to catch you because you're going to fall off it.
Push you down the hill or whatever, and hope for the best. Yeah. We've all got those stories. Exactly that. It was. I mean, the same thing. We were going and doing all the scout badges and the brownie badges, and we were working with the rainbows, and and the younger you got, almost the easier it was to teach because they didn't have that worry or fear of, I'm going to fall off, or I've seen how dangerous it's on the road. Because whether we think we're calm drivers or not, when they're in the car with you as parents or grandparents or whoever, they're picking up on, there's people walking out in the road, or all those things that kind of just those little messages all the time. So what we're finding is that fear of the road or cycling in general was just becoming more and more prominent. So it wasn't about can they ride a bike, because like you say, most people, if you just push them off, will eventually get it. Yeah, they'll fall over a few times and all those things. But actually, you remember that probably with rose-tinted glasses. Whereas if you ask a 12-year-old, how did you get taught? And they say, well, my dad pushed me down a hill and, and I panicked and crashed into the bin or whatever. It's just not it's a very big and important moment in a childhood, but it's not always remembered super fondly. I mean, that's just, I guess, the way the world has evolved since we were young people, So my thing was really to kind of, well, how can I stop that? How can I get it so there isn't such a big leap from stabilizers, like you say, because balance bikes weren't really a thing. Even when we started, they were just really getting going and becoming kind of useful and cool, and the quality of the bikes was not very good then, and whereas now they're amazing. The brakes are small, so the children can reach them with their small hands, and really simple things like that. So and then the real driver, if I'm totally honest, like everything else, is 2012. I had my own children, and then it was like, okay, so how am I going to teach these guys? I've got real life guinea pigs to practice on. And then it was that moment of taking my son to the seafront where we used to live in Weston-super-Mare. I used to push him. Then I pushed him off down the seafront, and he'd been riding with his balance bike for, I don't know, 2 months, 3 months, maybe, seriously. He'd always had it around, and he'd pick it up and play with it in the back garden. But then I took him to the seafront after school, and he would be pretty whizzy and pretty good, And then the day came when I finally said, okay, here's your big bike. And then he just went. I didn't need to push him. I didn't need to follow him down the hill. He literally just got on the thing, and I held the seat for a second, and he pedaled backwards, and I went, that's the motion. You got the motion? He went, yeah, I think so. And then I pushed him off, and off he went. It's kind of like trying to capture that moment of joy where he sort of turned around and went, oh, did you see me? It was amazing. And, but then instill that into somewhere in a setting, in school or nursery where you can have that as a teacher. The parent doesn't have that fear that there's somewhere they don't know, or, with somebody that doesn't care about them and all those things, because coming to me at that age, they came to me as a coach in a park, let's say, it's probably too young because they're not familiar with me. They don't necessarily feel safe, etc., etc. But if you can do it in the school where they already feel safe and they trust the teacher and all that sort of stuff, then that's, I found for me I wanted that to be the environment where they learn. For me, that was the best place to go. They're then gonna have that same environment until they do bikeability in year 5 and 6, or bikeability level 1 in year 2, 3, 4. So it just made sense for me to try and to push that. So there's all those things going on that kind of created the perfect storm, really, for us to come up with this scheme the way it was. So again, I'm talking a lot, I'm sorry, but that's kind of the background of how we evolved it to that position, really.
I think it was necessary as well. I mean, part of when I was doing my degree, part of my dissertation, I was looking at practitioners' understanding of like physical development and physical education of early years children. And actually, I found that most practitioners not that they didn't understand it, and not that they didn't understand the importance, particularly of physical development, but they didn't understand how the physical education part can tap into it to promote it. And things like, using balance bikes, using bikes and that kind of, the bikes and trikes that we have in the garden. It's not just a case of we're just going to put them out. It's about understanding and kind of honing in on what can this do and what can this do to benefit a child. And is that part of what Cyclings is about as well?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you're absolutely right. Like there is that translation of, I love cycling and I think it's brilliant. It makes me feel alive and incredible. And all my friends do as well, because, if you're a footballer or your friends are footballers, so all my friends are cyclists and we all love it and can't understand why people don't want to cycle. So how can I translate that joy and love and get that into a school? But then very quickly, when I started to write it, if that's the correct term, or research it for sure, was like, okay, these are the reasons why people don't want to use it. These are the reasons why people don't want to use those balance bikes that are stuck in the shed in school. So obvious one, safety concerns, what happens if they fall off? What happens, and then the other one is actually, what is that development route? Like, it just feels like play. And 10 years ago, play was a bad thing.
It was a swear word.
My thing was always like, well, we should be playing. Even as adults, we should be outside. We should be playing. Play is a fantastic thing. It's how we learn. I watched my children, they're at that age now. We're talking, back when I'm building this thing, and all they wanted to do was play. I would leave them on the floor for 5 seconds, and I'd turn around and they'd have the empty box that I left on the floor, and it was a castle. That they learn by playing. So how can I translate that into something that, how can I translate balance biking, into something where they just feel like they're playing? So I wrote it. So here's the honest truth: is I have a very like childlike brain. I'm becoming convinced as I'm getting older now that I have ADHD. Like I'm going through the process now of being diagnosed. I've never actually said that out loud to anyone other than my wife. So you've got an exclusive. I don't know if that
All
changes
right, I'm ADHD myself.
the compromise of the conversation. But so, I see things very simply. Like I don't see risk. I just want everyone to be happy, and I want to be doing fun things and happy, and everyone happy all the time, which is very, it's a superpower, but it's sometimes a burden. But with this particular thing, it was like, okay, so I want to keep in my mind all the time, whatever we do has to be fun for the child. So they're going to come out into the garden of the nursery or wherever the setting is, and they're going to look at this kit, this folder that we've created, and the bikes, and even the color. They're going to want to pick them up. They're going to want to ride. They're going to want to do it because it's fun and it's play, and that's all it is. So all the games are designed to almost like not get in the way of that. So there is a reason why they're in there, and they all work on a certain skill or certain characteristics of the COEL or the Development Matters framework. But the children don't need to know that. The children just want to pick it up and start whizzing around, right? Yeah. So all the games are designed, and they've all got animals. So it's the mouse steps and the rabbit steps and the elephant steps, and then it's the spaceman up in spacewalk, and and then we're going to stomp in on jellyfish, and all these different games that are just supposed to be fun and get the imagination firing. Mm-hmm. But then I went, okay, so simple brain here needs a bit of help to like figure out the behind the scenes of this, because actually, why is the school going to buy this? Why isn't the school just going to get the bikes out and just leave them in the playground and let kids play and explore? Well, because they've got to be hitting these targets of the characteristics of effective learning, and they've got to do records of achievement. So how can what we do fit in with that? So, we want to play the game where we go and stomp on all the spiders, and I know it's fun and it's really cool, and we get to pretend to be like, going and stomping all the spiders and ridding the world of evil spiders, and it's just a bit of fun. Whereas actually what's in the Cyclings framework is we're exploring the world around us, or we're, using tools, or we're using our imagination. So
yeah.
But I needed help with that. So this is where these teachers came in, so I would go in and say, I think I've written this game and I think it, works on this core skill. And they go, yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, not bad, And then we try it on the children and go, well, actually, but the children don't like it. Okay, well, that one's gone. Let's try something else. And that's how we evolved it. So, it had proper grown-ups at the top, and then it had me in the middle, and I was like the conduit between the children and the actual what needed to be in there, which for me was a fun position, because I got to go and try these things out and I got to do them. But then the third and probably most important part is kind of sadly, I guess, is that Cyclings has to be sellable. Like, the big part of it was working out why, as a head teacher or a nursery manager or whoever, actually going to buy this thing, because it's an investment. They need to buy the bikes, they need to buy the kit, they need to train the staff, they need to, and so it was then saying, okay, well, so all the planning and marking is done here. So let's make that more obvious. So let's actually include in the resources like questions to ask. This is how to set the game up. These are questions that you need to ask. This is how you do your review. This is how you do your, and then actually have in the back a certificate which has, a tick sheet on it. I can fit my own helmet, tick. I can glide for 5 seconds, tick. I can play with my friends nicely, tick. So, and then just have a little box where you can stick a picture and sign it, and then that goes straight into record achievement. So there's no planning, there's no marking. So all of a sudden then, if you're trying to teach and you've got all these things, this isn't one extra thing to worry about. So it removes one of those barriers to entry, So it wasn't just a case of trying to design it with the children in mind. It was always design it with the children in mind and the teachers in mind and the head teachers in mind. That it was always that three-pronged kind of fork, really. So it looks like a nice glossy and fun and shiny thing, and it's supposed to just want the children to go out and play, but there's all that stuff behind it as well. And the trick was always to kind of try and keep that, like, from preventing that from taking over and making it less of a fun thing to deliver. So yeah, that was a challenge.
I think so as well. It's, you were talking about the tick sheet there, and that I had a flashback to when I did bikeability, and I did a similar thing because they were older children. I gave them their sort of bikeability passport. I
Yeah.
think I've probably still got the resource somewhere on my computer because I
Yeah. Yeah.
created it. But on there, we had the tick sheet to say, yes, I can do this. Yes, I can do this. They could tick it and we would sign it each week because we broke it into sort of like modules almost.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. If we were happy with that, we would sign it off at the end and they'd go home with their passport and look, I've done this week. And I think as well, like you're saying, like if the children have got that and they can say, look, Mum, I've done this today. I've done this today. But equally, like you say, the saleable part of it is it's almost like off the shelf. You've done all the hard work, which for nurseries, that is a huge thing because we are cash strapped and time poor all the time.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and it is really good that you've got a resource that will actually benefit children in a different way,
Yeah.
So that's
For
really,
sure,
really
it's a
useful.
different stimulus, a different way of learning. It's
Hmm.
probably, it's probably more formalized without becoming too formal, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So it's got the process behind it, and it's got the kind of the Ofsted are going to look at it and say, well, yeah, okay, well, we're actually are working towards these goals. We're not just letting them play in the garden, but to the children, hopefully, it still just feels like they're playing.
Yeah.
I guess the fourth thing I've missed off that list is like the parents. Like the parents have to feel like you're adding something to the child's
Yeah.
development, right? So we're looking at the development of gross motor skills and then fine motor skills, and that leading to finer pen control. So, I was supposed to start a PhD. There was a lovely lady, Liz, at the University of Bath, and I was discussing with her about maybe this could become a PhD thing where actually we go in and we look at how cyclings or balance biking is different than other different sports or activities
Hmm.
in the development of those gross motor skills, because by very definition it's balance biking, like that's what it's supposed to do. So is it better at building balance and then in turn the fine motor skills than something like football or any activity you can name?
Hmm.
I keep using football because I was a footballer when I was a kid, so it's just easy for me to remember. And sadly then COVID hit, so this is 2020. We spent a year delivering this in schools and really fine-tuning everything, and we've created the
Hmm.
pack. We're just about to like hit it and go everywhere, and I'm super excited because I'm not a businessman. I don't like the interaction of the business stuff, so it's kind of taken me a few years to go, right, come on, we got to start putting this out in the world now. The world needs to see this. I can't deliver it myself every day. It has to be
Yeah.
deliverable by other people, and in order for us to get all these wonderful young children on bikes. So I sort of just gone through that process. And then it was like, oh, COVID's here and the schools might never be a thing again, which is why then for the following 4-5 years, realistically, I just did nothing. Just did nothing about it. It just kind of felt sorry for myself and thought, wow, how wonderful cycling would have been, on a semi-regular basis. And then it was really the start of this year. I had a few contacts with some people who said to me, hey, listen, like you just need this thing to be out there. It's too good to
Hmm.
be sat in a drawer, and honestly, as a person who's fairly not a lack of confidence, I guess, but kind of like businesses isn't my thing. It's not my natural
No.
environment, having to sell and having to talk figures and things. It makes me deeply uncomfortable. I just don't like it. I want to be out there delivering the thing, whereas I can only do that in 2 schools a day, realistically. Whereas, if we get this 23,000 schools in the UK and we get even 5% of those, we're talking a lot of children who can now, grown up learning to
Hmm.
ride, feeling completely safe and feeling completely comfortable. And it's something that they do for fun with their friends. And, it never becomes a factor, all these reasons that they have when they get to 11 why they can't ride and they can't do bikeability and they're not commuting to secondary school, etc. Hopefully, a lot of those are eliminated by them learning so early and feeling comfortable on a bike.
I think that's, yeah, it is that bit. It's, cycling has become huge. Now, where I live in Yorkshire, it's massive for cycling around here, particularly in sort of the Vale of York where I am, because
Yeah.
it's pretty flat. And you'll go out most weekends and there are like masses of bikes ahead of you because it's kind of a city that thrives on bikes, but like, say Oxford or somewhere like that.
Yeah.
But I think it's about as early as possible getting those core skills into children that they know what they're looking for, they know how to operate their bike, they know how to balance, they know how to move it. There's a lot of development skills that young children will have, but also it's getting them ready for the future where they will want to use a bike and get
Yeah.
out on the road, which, like you say, is a dangerous place. But if we've taught them early enough, then they've got the skills and the knowledge to know how to be safe.
Yeah, I mean, it can be a dangerous place if you don't know what you're doing and you don't feel comfortable. And so if you're habituated, that's not a word we use in English, is it? That's a French word that I've picked up, habitué. So if we're kind of used to
Mm-hmm.
being in that situation, it doesn't become scary, and then we don't panic. It's the panic that ultimately gets you in trouble. So if you're on a bike and the first half an hour of a balance bike session, we would just walk with the bike, just walk next to it, because it moves very strangely.
Mm-hmm.
If you turn slightly, it can fall over and you go with it. So
Yeah.
until they feel comfortable, we're just walking with the bike. We're just getting used to what is this funny black lever on the front do? Well, that's the brake, and that will stop you. Oh, right, okay. Well, can't I just drag my feet on the floor? Oh, you could, but those shoes are quite expensive, and someone's had to get quite a lot of effort to get you those shoes. So maybe we use the brakes, But it's also about the fine motor skills. So it's
Yeah.
I'm using my brakes. I'm understanding the correlation between I need to stop and I need to use my brake and not just drag my feet on the ground. So there's a lot more development. I think that thing I alluded to earlier of in 2007, cycling wasn't cool and it wasn't really a done thing. The difference now is massive. I go into school now and everybody knows a cyclist, and after 2012, everyone's got an uncle that rides a bike or can name a famous cyclist, or I'm obviously sort of being a little bit flippant, but it's much more mainstream than it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, Cyclings is as much about making sure that people understand that it can be taught in that way as well. You don't have to be a cyclist to teach it. It doesn't only have the benefit of making you a cyclist. It also has all those gross motor skill, the fine motor skill control, and I went to a school on Thursday last week, beautiful school in Kings Lynn, and I delivered the training for the teachers essentially, and doing that was basically taking out each group, make sure every child in the school got to have a go at cycling. And you can see just in 45 minutes the difference in the ability of a child. And it's not about just how they move on that bike, it's about how they move in general. So they're walking out and they're skipping and really enjoying themselves, and this is going to be amazing, and then they get on and then it goes right back to basics. They're literally taking tiny steps and they feel really uncomfortable and they're all wobbly and a bit nervous, but by the end of 45 minutes, well, actually, this is okay. I'm starting to feel okay again. So then you can build up from that. So, we're not looking to get the next Olympian out of doing this. We're just looking for children just to feel a bit confident to try new things and then learn, a life skill that will hopefully carry them over to when they get older, but also, it's going to help them be able to write better in class and use scissors and all those things that, kind of activities we're starting to now understand that there's a good crossover, and that's where Cyclings wants to be, really, where we're on that crossover of it's about education of cycling, but it's also about the development of the whole child. So
it really does. I mean, you were saying as well, like it's play based, which research has shown this is how children really do learn best, is everything should be playful and playfully taught. But also, like you were saying there about writing skills, I guess a lot of practitioners may not have thought about that, but actually when you're sitting on the balance bike, you're using your core muscles to kind of keep yourself on there, and actually that is something that is needed for writing, because if you're working on the core, then you've got that ability to sit up to then hold the pencil. So this is giving early developmental skills and moving the child forward to doing things later on in life, that when they are in school they'll be able to sit up straight and hold a pencil.
Yeah, and look where they're going, and think about the people who are moving around them and the unpredictability of them. I saw a child the other day, and they were running along, and another one sort of nearly toppled over in front of them. And this first child put their brakes on and sat and looked at me with a big smile on his face, and I said, life doesn't get any better than that. That's exactly what I've asked you to do. Like, brilliant, well done. And obviously that he got that straight away. But other children, you might teach them and do balance biking session twice a week for a year, and they still can't do it. They're still bumping into walls and things like that. But I think it's just creating that safe environment where you're limiting the potential of the day, because let's not overlook the fact that, you know, like a lot of people don't want to teach cycling in school or nurseries because children might fall off their bike and hurt themselves. And that is a possibility, you know. So the first thing that they learn is how to put their own helmet on and why that's important. So even if it's just that, you're starting to think about the care of self, you know. So that goes in with the lessons. Like my son, he really hated brushing his teeth when he was a very young child. You know, that's something we really had to work with him on. But then he started to understand, well, I don't like the sensation of brushing my teeth, but actually I understand I need to look after my teeth, and that made the difference. And this is the same thing, you know. So actually I hate wearing a helmet, and it's a bit uncomfortable, and but actually I understand why I need to wear one. So this is much about that. And then what we do is we get them, you know, they'll come up and say, can you put my helmet on, please? And I'll say, no. You know, you go and get one of your friends to help you. And you know, I don't say it quite that cruelly. If they do need help, then I will give it to them. But the idea is that they will learn to put each other's helmet on, so they're learning to work together. So all these soft skills, you know, I hate that term because these are the important things, right? Like if you can help friends, and you can, you know, not crash into your friends, and you can help your friend up if they do fall, and you can show some empathy. Like these are the things that make us truly wonderful, beautiful human beings, you know. So Cyclings is kind of as much about that as it is about cycling, really. So yeah.
Brilliant. Well, Marc, time is crept up on us, but how can people get in touch with you to find out more about Cyclings?
Well, the Cyclings website is undergoing a bit of a change, undergoing a bit of a revamp. But if you can find Cyclings on the web, so Cyclings, so like cycling but with an S on the end. It's like a play on words with ducklings, because whenever you put them on, the children always follow each other around. It's quite cool. It's like little ducks swimming around. So it's cyclings.co.uk. Or people can find me on LinkedIn, or you can just email me, Marc, that's Marc with a C, M-A-R-C, @cyclings.co.uk. Just get in touch. And then obviously I'm just happy to, as you've probably witnessed, I'm happy to kind of chat and talk cyclings all day. You know, I love it as a sport, as an activity, and as a development thing. You know, for me, it's just it's up there. You know, so yeah.
Brilliant. Well, Marc, thank you so much for coming on Circle Time. Every time you were talking there was little bits going, oh yeah, that's that development and that development and that development. And you said at the start, like before we started recording, that I'm not an early years person. I don't understand the development. Actually, everything you talked about within Cyclings and cycling as a whole, I was picking bits out, going, yeah, that would work for that development. That would work for that development.
Yeah.
And if you've got the resources there, I think, any educator will be able to pick that out and go, yeah, I know that'll help that, and that'll help with that. So amazing. Thank you.
No formal early years education, but in 15 years of doing it, you know, you hopefully pick up a thing or two. And kind of like was it Ronald Reagan, the American president, said, well, I don't know a lot about a lot, so I surround myself with people that do, you know. So that was my development, was listening and learning and watching other people do it and picking it up, and like you say, cherry picking the best bits. And hopefully this is you know what Cyclings has gone on to be. So yeah, but thanks for having me. It's been amazing. Thank you.
No, brilliant. Marc Molloy, thank you very much.